Hello and welcome to the third lecture of the chapter Organisms and Population. So in the previous two lectures we were discussing about organisms, the various abiotic factors and how the organisms are adapted to these abiotic factors. In this lecture we'll be discussing the basics of population ecology and the basics of population attributes and population growth. So let's start with the first topic, that is population ecology. So we can very rarely see isolated organisms. Mostly when we talk about any particular species, we are able to see a population, not a single individual. Single individuals are very rare to found in the surrounding that is present around us. So what exactly is population? Population is a group of organisms which are seen in a well-defined geographical area which share or compete for the similar resources, potentially interbreed, and constitute a population. So, population is a group of organisms which can share a particular geographical area and they can compete or share a similar resource. They can potentially interbreed, resulting in the formation of a fertile offspring. They can produce a fertile offspring and they can live in a certain geographical area as a group. These group of organisms are known as population. So if we take what is the significance of population, we have to understand that population ecology is extremely significant in the study of ecology. Why is it so? The reason is that the concept of natural selection, is applicable only to a population. So the essence of natural selection lies in population. So population ecology is acting as a connecting link between ecology and population genetics. That is why population ecology is a very important subject, because the essence of natural selection lies in population, or the unit of natural selection lies in population. That is why there is a, what can say is that there is a inevitable relationship, an unavoidable relationship between ecology and population genetics. So let us now start with the population attributes. Now what is the meaning of the term attribute? Attribute means a character, and these attributes that we'll be discussing over here, they are characteristics which are meant for a population. These cannot be explained on an organismic level, rather they can be explained only at the level of a population. So if we look at the various population attributes, there are five. Number one is birth rate, number two is death rate, sex ratio, age pyramid, and population density. These are the five different population attributes that we have to study in this particular chapter. Starting with the very first one, that is birth rate. So what is birth rate? Birth rate refers to the average number of young ones which are produced by birth or hatching or germination per unit time. That means it is the number of birth per 1,000 individuals in the population per year, that is known as birth rate. So birth rate has a formula. We will study the formula when we are applying the concept of birth rate. So to understand the concept of birth rate, let me take up an illustration here. If in a pond there are 40 lotus plants last year and through reproduction 16 new plants were added, taking the current population to be 56, calculate the birth rate. So initially there were 40 lotus plants, and by sexual reproduction 16 more plants have been added, and finally the current population is 56. We have to find out what is the birth rate. So to calculate birth rate, what we have to we have to use this particular formula, that is number of individuals born divided by total number of individuals. Number of individuals born is 16 as per the question, and the total number of individuals which is already present is 40. So it is 16 divided by 40, or it is coming out to be approximately 0.4. So that is the birth rate. This can be asked as a 2-mark question in the board examination. So this is about birth rate. Moving on with the second characteristic, which is death rate. Death rate is also known as mortality. What is this thing? Mortality refers to the deaths in the population. Mortality refers to the deaths in the population, and the number of deaths that has happened per 1,000 individuals is known as the death rate. Number of individuals who have died per 1000 individuals is known as the death rate. So if we look at the equation, to understand the equation, I will take an illustration over here. If 8 individuals in a laboratory population of 80 fruit flies died during a specific time interval, say a week, then calculate the death rate in the population during that period. So this is the method by which we can use. Death rate is equal to number of individuals divided by total number of individuals. So it is coming out to be 8 divided by 80, or it is 0.1 individuals per week. So that is the concept of death rate. Moving on with the third important attribute, which is known as sex ratio. Sex ratio is the ratio of males and females which is present in a population. So usually if we take this particular example, we can see that in a particular population 60% are females and 40% are males. So here the sex ratio is coming out to be 60:40 or 3:2. Moving on with the fourth population attribute, which is known as age pyramid. So what is age pyramid? Age pyramid means it is a pyramid which is plotted when we are taking age distribution versus the number of organisms. Age distribution versus number of organisms, when plotted, we will be getting different figures, and these figures are known as age pyramids. For human population, the age pyramids are generally showing the age distribution of males and females in a single diagram. So in the left side we can see males, and on the right side we can see females in the age pyramid. Now there are three different types of age pyramid. First one is known as expanding, second is known as stable, and the third one is known as declining. So let us study each of these. Starting with the first one, that is the expanding age pyramid. In expanding age pyramid, what happens is that whatever be the age pyramid, we will be considering three major groups of people: pre-reproductive group, reproductive group, and post-reproductive group. Pre-reproductive groups are those which is less than 18 years of age. Reproductive are those which is belonging to 18 to 45 years of age, and post-reproductive is greater than 45 years of age. So if we plot the graph accordingly, we can see that in the case of expanding population, the pre-reproductive group is greater in number, reproductive group is comparatively lesser, and post-reproductive is the least. So this is what we are getting when we are plotting for the expanding growth. Whereas in the case of stable growth, we can see that all are almost similar. The pre-reproductive group, the reproductive group, and post-reproductive group are almost similar. So that is the condition for stable age pyramid. In the case of declining age pyramid, what happens is that the number of pre-reproductive group is comparatively very less as compared to the reproductive age group. So if the pre is less than reproductive, then we can say that it is a declining. This is a declining pyramid, and declining pyramid is a characteristic of, we can say it is a characteristic of underdeveloped countries, and expanding is a characteristic of developing countries, and stable is the characteristic of developed countries. So now let us talk about the fifth attribute, which is known as population density, and this is the most important population attribute. So let us talk about what is population density. Population density is actually a measure of the size of the population. To measure the size of the population, we use the concept of population density. So size is usually measured in terms of population density, and if you go by the definition of population density, it means the number of person living per unit area. So if I denote population density by the letter D, that is given by the number of person, that is N, in area S. So D is equal to N divided by S, where N is the number of individuals and S is the area. S is the area of the geographical figure or geographical area that we are considering. So this is how we are calculating the population density. But if I go for measuring the population density by using this particular equation, there is a limitation. What is that limitation? If we have to find the total number of organisms in a particular area, say it's a very large area, then it is nearly impossible for us to find out which organism is occupying greater biomass in that particular area just by considering the number of organisms which are present. Like if I have a particular land where there are 200 carrot grass, so the scientific name of carrot grass is important. Parthenium hysterophorus. So this can be asked in the NEET examination. You are studying about Parthenium hysterophorus in different areas. One is coming in the chapter of reproduction, sexual reproduction, flowering plants. Another is coming in the chapter of health and diseases when we are dealing with allergies, and another we are studying in the chapter organisms and population, and also we are studying it in the chapter biodiversity and conservation. So in 4 chapters you are studying about Parthenium hysterophorus. So this is an important plant which you have to study. It can be asked for the exams, entrance exam most particularly. So if we take a large population, like if I have a large piece of land, and in that particular piece of land there are nearly 200 Parthenium species and a single banyan tree. So if I am just going by counting the number of Parthenium species, it is easy. It's not too easy, but still it's comparatively easy rather than comparing to an area having 1000 Parthenium species and 2 banyan tree, right? Compared to counting of 200, sorry, compared to counting of 1000, counting of 200 is comparatively easy. But still, this is going to be a time consuming task. Counting of each and every individual Parthenium species is going to be a time consuming task. So in that particular case, we will not calculate population density in terms of n divided by s formula. So in that case, we will be using the relative population density, where we will just observe which particular plant or which particular organism is having greater in number. So just by seeing that particular plot, we can understand that the percentage cover of biomass of Parthenium is very high as compared to the banyan tree. Hence, we can say that the population density of Parthenium is greater than that of banyan tree. So just by looking, we are making a rough estimate that this is having greater number. And counting 1 and 2 is very easy, so we can just go for counting of that. But we cannot count this very easily, especially when the number is extremely high, like 1000, 10,000, etc. It's impossible for us to count in that particular case because it is a time consuming process. Another example where we cannot use this formula n by s is that of a tiger population. Like if I have a tiger population in a national park or tiger reserve, I cannot go to the forest directly and count the number of tigers there, right? It is going to be riskier. So instead of that, we can use the puck marks. These are the puck marks, or we can use the fecal pellets. If we see more fecal pellets in a particular area, then we can see that the population density of tigers is high over there. But if we hardly find fecal pellets of tiger in a particular area, then we can say that the population density of tiger in that area is comparatively lesser. Similarly, in the case of fish that is caught per trap, if we are getting more fish when we are putting the net into water, then we can say that the population density of fish is higher at that particular area as compared to the one where lesser number of fishes are coming in the net. So all these are the various methods of measuring relative population density. So we have discussed about the 5 population attributes: birth rate, death rate, sex ratio. The 4th one was age pyramid, and the 5th one is population density. Now let us understand the concept of population growth. This is going to be the most important topic of this chapter. So let us start with population growth. Before moving on with population growth, we have to study what are the factors that is affecting population density. So in a broader perspective, we can say that population density becomes almost equal to population size. Population density is almost equal to population size, and the population size at a particular instant of time of any population, that does not remain a constant. It keeps on fluctuating because of a large number of factors. It can be environmental factors, it can be ecological factors, and many more. But majorly it is affected by 4 factors. Number 1 is natality, number 2 is mortality, number 3 is immigration, and number 4 is emigration. So what is natality? Natality refers to the reproductive output of a population. That means the number of births that are happening in a particular area in a particular period of time. That is known as natality. So number of births that is happening. It is not birth rate. At a greater scale, if you are considering, it is not birth rate. Rather, we can say that it is the reproductive output or the number of births. We are not dividing it by the total number of organisms. If we divide by the total number, then it is birth rate. But here we are considering only the number of births. If 5 lotus plants are born by reproduction, then we can say that the natality is 5, not 5 divided by something. I hope this is clear to you. Similarly, coming to mortality, the number of deaths that has happened in a particular area in a period of time is known as mortality. Number of deaths, it is not same as death rate. Moving on with the third one, that is immigration. So what is immigration and emigration? Immigration means to a particular habitat, new organisms are being added. New organisms are being occupied, that is known as immigration. And if you are leaving from our own original habitat or natural habitat, then it is known as emigration. The process of shifting from the natural habitat is known as emigration. So these are the 4 factors that is affecting population density or population size. Now, what is the effect that these factors are going to have? If we look at natality, natality is birth, right? So whenever new organisms are born, it will increase the population density. That is where plus sign is put over there. For immigration, if we apply a sign convention, immigration means new organisms are being added to the habitat, so the population density will increases. If population increases, then obviously population density will also increases. That is why here the sign convention is a plus sign. Similarly, if we take the case of mortality, the number of organisms is going to decrease. That is why we have a negative sign. And in the case of emigration, we are shifting from the habitat, so it is again going to be a negative sign. So this is the sign convention for immigration and natality. We can put a plus sign, whereas in the case of mortality and emigration, we can put a negative sign. So if I take 2 instants of time, I'm going to take 2 instants. Let us take nt, and another instant of time is nt plus 1. So if I have to calculate the population at a time nt plus 1, then I can use the formula nt plus 1 is equal to the original population plus something else is also being added. And what is that something else? It is the sum of all these fluctuating factors, right? So those fluctuating factors I'm going to write over here, b plus minus d, because the sign is negative over there, plus I plus minus e. So this is how I am going to write the fluctuating factors one by one, applying the sign convention. So I will be getting nt plus 1 is equal to nt plus b plus minus d plus I plus minus e. Now I am going to rearrange all these terms to get a final equation. Nt plus 1 is equal to nt plus b plus I minus of d plus e. This is going to be the population at a particular time t plus 1, provided I have the population at a time nt. So using this formula, we can explain the concept of population growth, the types of population growth. If this particular factor, that is b plus I, is greater than d plus e, then what happens is that this complete term is going to be a positive term. So when a positive quantity is added to nt, which is already a positive quantity, then nt plus 1 is going to be greater than nt. So that is known as expanding population. Whereas if b plus I becomes exactly equal to d plus e, then nt plus 1 becomes same as nt. That is known as a stable population. Whereas if b plus I is less than d plus e, then this is going to be a negative quantity. In that particular case, nt plus 1 will be less than nt. So we will be getting a declining population. So now let us do a question related to this particular formula. So we have to understand this question in detail, then only we can proceed. It is a very easy question, but still it's a little tricky. Consider an isolated population. So what is the meaning of isolated population? So in the case of an isolated population, what happens is that the immigration and emigration will be 0. So consider an isolated population in which the number of deaths is 20 less than the number of births. That means D is given by B minus 20. And immigration is equal to 0. Emigration is equal to 0. Assume that the birth is B. So B is same as B. Now if I apply, we have to find what is the change in population. Change in population is NT plus 1 minus NT. So that is equal to B minus D. That is equal to B minus 20. So that will comes out to be 20. So the change in population is 20 in this particular case. Moving on with the next topic, that is growth models, and this is the most important topic. So before that, I would like to introduce you to a little bit of calculus, the basic formulas of calculus which is required for this particular topic. And the basics is, number one is limit of del x tends to 0, del x by del t is same as derivative of x with respect to time, so it is dx divided by dt. Another formula that is important is d by dx of x raised to n is equal to n x raised to n minus 1. Another important formula is d by dx of log x is equal to 1 by x. So if I take integral of 1 by x dx, then it is going to be log x. But in science we will usually use natural logarithm, so we can take ln of x. And another important result is, so for the time being let us stop with this, and we have to know two graphs also, especially that of exponential growth and linear graph. For exponential graph, that is of the form y is equal to e raised to x, the graph is going to be like j. And in the case of linear graph, it is of the form y is equal to mx plus c. So in that particular case, we will be having a straight graph, something like this, and this value is the c value. This is the y-axis and this is the x-axis. So these are some of the basic concepts that you should have before proceeding with population growth models. So now let us start with population growth models. Before moving forward, we have to study some basics of biology as well. So let us look at two important terms. One is known as biotic potential and another is carrying capacity. Starting with biotic potential. Now what is biotic potential? When the external environmental factors are extremely stable or extremely favorable, then what happens is that one particular organism is having an ability to produce maximum number of organisms so as to increase the size of its territory. This ability of an organism to produce maximum number of organisms by reproduction under favorable conditions is known as biotic potential. Another name of biotic potential is environmental resistance. So the equation of environmental resistance is K minus N by K. We will study about this when we are dealing with logistic growth model. Another important term that you have to discuss over here is the carrying capacity. What is carrying capacity? Our nature is having a particular limit. Everything has a limit, right? So the same concept can be applied in the case of our nature also. Up to a particular limit, a certain number of organisms can be present in the environment. So that maximum level that our nature can hold is known as carrying capacity. So these two terms are very important: environmental resistance or biotic potential, which is the ability of an organism ability of an organism to produce maximum number of organisms under favorable conditions, and carrying capacity is the limit which our environment can support under any condition. That is known as carrying capacity. So once we understood these two terms, let us now start with the two growth models. The first one is known as the exponential growth model and the second one is known as the logistic growth model. So first let me talk about exponential growth model. In exponential growth model, we are considering that the conditions are extremely favorable. So when the conditions are extremely favorable, I can take an example of a microbial culture. If I take microbes which are growing in agar medium, so in that particular case, what is happening is we are constantly supplying the medium. So when we are constantly supplying the medium, as far as the microbes are concerned, they are having a totally favorable condition over there. This is seen in the case of bioreactors, as you could recall from biotechnology chapter. So when we are adding a lot of nutrient to it, what happens is that the microbes are going to have a favorable condition. So under favorable condition, what happens? Initially one cell will be present, that will become 2 cell, and then that 2 cell become 4 cell, 4 become 8, like that it goes, right? So if I plot a graph between the number of organisms versus time, I will be getting a graph something like this. Initially the growth is very slow, and after a threshold value it increases exponentially. It does not have any limit. It will crosses the carrying capacity limit also, and it will go further. This is the graph that we are getting when we are plotting the graph between the number of organisms with time when the conditions are extremely favorable. So this curve is known as the exponential growth curve, which is also known as the J-shaped curve. This is a J-shaped curve. Now, what is the reason for this J-shaped curve? How can we explain this mathematically? If I go for the mathematical explanation of the J-shaped curve, I have to start from the basics of limits. So let me start with the basic concepts. If I take the change in population, as we have already studied, the population at a particular time does not remain constant all the time. So the population keeps on changing with respect to time. So that change in population with respect to time, denoted by delta n divided by delta t, that is going to be directly proportional to the population at that particular instant, that is nt. So I have del n by del t is directly proportional to nt. Or I can say, if I'm applying limit on both sides, I can say limit of del t tends to 0, del n divided by del t is equal to r into n, where r is known as intrinsic rate of natural increase. It is known as intrinsic rate of natural increase. We will study about what is intrinsic rate of natural increase in some time. So now this complete LHS, I can write it as dn by dt, as I have already told before. This is equal to Rn. Now what we have is known as the differential rate equation. Differential rate equation. We cannot plot a graph just by seeing the differential rate equation. So let us go for the integrated rate equation. For that, I'm going to do a little bit of rearrangement. So at present, I'm having the equation dn by dt is equal to Rn. So if I bring this n to this side, I will be getting dn divided by n is equal to r dt. Integrating on both sides, I will get integral of dn by n is equal to integral of r dt. And if I put the limits, here it is from n0 to nt, and here it is from 0 to t. So expanding, we will be getting ln nt, or you can say ln n within the limit n0 to nt is equal to rt minus r0, r into 0, that is 0. So ultimately we will be getting ln of nt minus ln of n0, that I can write it as ln nt by n0, because log of a minus b is log a minus log b is equal to log of a by b. So this is coming out to be the final equation. So if I take anti-logarithm on both sides, then I will be getting nt by n0 is equal to e to the power rt. This is going to be my final equation. Nt by n0 is equal to e raised to rt. This is going to be my final equation. This is the integrated rate equation. We are getting an exponential equation. So when we plot a graph, we are getting an exponential curve, which you can see in this particular picture. It's a J-shaped curve. And this is when the conditions are extremely favorable. Whereas if I plot a graph between ln nt versus t, then I will be getting a straight line with the y-intercept of ln n0. So I will show you that as well. The equation is ln nt minus ln n0, that I can bring to the other side, is equal to ln n0 plus e raised to rt. So this is of the form, this is rt So if I plot a graph, this is of the form y is equal to c plus mx, a straight line curve. So if I plot a graph between ln nt versus time, then I'm going to get a straight line, and this value is going to give me my c, that is ln n0. So this is the graph we are getting when we are plotting a graph between ln nt versus t. So these are the two important graphs that we have got from here, and we have seen the example also. Now coming to the concept of R. R is a constant of proportionality which is known as the intrinsic rate of natural increase, and R is a very important parameter because it helps to assess the impact of environmental factors on population growth. And the equation for small r is given by small b minus small d. Now what is this small b and small d? Small b denotes to births per capita and small d denotes to death per capita. That means capital B divided by n. Capital B, that is the number of organisms, divided by the total number of organisms, that is same as birth rate. So that is known as small b. So birth rate is denoted as small b and death rate is denoted as small d. So R is equal to small b minus small d into n. So ultimately I will get an equation for the J-shaped curve, something like this. dn by dt is equal to b minus d into n, or we can say dn by dt is equal to Rn. This is going to be the equation. So it is happening at the favorable condition, J-shaped curve, example is bacteria culture, and remarks is intrinsic rate of natural increase. That is the term that we are learning from this particular concept. And if we look at the R value for different organisms, it can be different. Like if we take the case of Norway rat, it is 0.015. For floor beetle, it is 0.12. And for Indian population, it is coming out to be 0.0205 as per NCRT. So it keeps on varying. Like in 2001 it have became 0.0176, so it keeps on varying with respect to time. And another example that we can take is the algal blooms and insect population in a rainy season and so on. So this was all about exponential growth model. We have seen the derivation and also the equation, that is nt is equal to n naught into e raised to rt. Now let us do a question. This is a question from NCRT exercises, so let us discuss this question here. If the population growing exponentially double its size in 3 years, so t is equal to 3 and nt is equal to 2 times of n naught, what is the intrinsic rate of natural increase is asked. So we can use the formula nt is equal to n naught e raised to rt. But if you don't know how to calculate the questions related to e value, then it's better convert it into logarithm. So before that I will do a little bit of division. Nt by n naught, dividing both sides by n naught, we are getting nt by n naught is equal to e to the power rt. So if I take logarithm and I have to convert it into common logarithm, because the equation that we have is in terms of natural logarithm, so I will convert it into common logarithm by multiplying it with 2.303. So I will be getting it as log nt by n naught. So I'll erase this completely. So log nt by n naught is equal to 2.303 rt. This is going to be my equation. So I can substitute it over here, log 2, because nt is equal to 2 times of n naught. So by n naught we can cancel and get it as 2 is equal to 2.303. So I think I have done a little bit of mistake here. This should come in the denominator. Sorry, this should come in the denominator. So I'll take it over here. We have to divide. If you have to convert natural logarithm into common logarithm, we have to divide. So it should be 2.303 on this side. And now here we have rt. So r is 3. Sorry, t is 3 and the other one is t itself. So from this we can solve for t. Only t is unknown over here. Log 2 is 0.3010. So just by substitution and simplification we'll get the value for t. We can find out from this easily. So the equation should be clear. Most probably the equation of nt by n naught is equal to e raised to rt. If you know the basics of logarithm, the value of e, then that is also fine. Otherwise we can go for this method. Moving on with logistic growth model. That is the second type of growth model, and this is a realistic model. The exponential growth model does not happen in reality, whereas the realistic growth model, that happens at reality. So this particular growth model was proposed by two scientists, Verhulst and Pearl. That is why it is known as Verhulst-Pearl logistic growth model. So these two scientists suggested that the equation dn by dt is equal to Rn is a wrong equation. We have to multiply it with the factor. And what is that factor? We can introduce that factor here, 1 minus n by k. If we are multiplying the equation of exponential growth model by this equation, by this factor on one side, then the equation becomes realistic. So this is a realistic equation, and we have dn by dt is equal to Rn into 1 minus n by k. So this is going to be the equation for logistic growth model, the differential rate equation. And if we go by the integrated rate equation, this is going to be the equation. Derivation is not required at our level because we have to do a little bit of rearrangement and partial fraction and things like that have to be done. So that is not required at our level. So we can stop with this equation. Nt is equal to n naught e to the power r into k minus n by k into t. So instead of our previous equation e raised to rt, we have just introduced this particular factor over there. That's it. So now the shape of the graph, that is the most important one. The shape is a sigmoid graph. It is a sigmoid curve, or we can say it is an S-shaped curve. We are getting an S-shaped curve in the case of logistic growth model. So initially the growth is very slow, that is known as the initial phase, and then it is going exponentially, so that is known as exponential phase, and ultimately we are having the asymptote reaching at the carrying capacity level. And this factor k minus n by k is known as the biotic potential or the environmental resistance, which we have discussed before. And here at carrying capacity, what happens is that the number of organisms will stop, the growth will stop, and this condition is known as asymptote. And the condition for asymptote is dn by dt becomes equal to 0. So these are some of the important points related to the sigmoid curve. Point number 1 is that it is S-shaped. Initially there is a lag phase, exponential phase, and then there is a log phase. This is known as exponential phase. This is known as the lag phase, and ultimately we are having the log phase. Log phase begins when it reaches the asymptote. Condition for asymptote is dn by dt is equal to 0, or we can say k becomes exactly equal to n. How is it coming? We'll discuss when we are doing a question related to this. And this is happening in the unfavorable condition, and that is why it is considered as a realistic growth curve. So it is S-shaped, and equation is dn by dt is equal to Rn into k minus n by k. Example is elephant population or any other population, and this introduces us to the concept of carrying capacity. So these were the differences between exponential growth model and logistic growth model. And now let us move on to the last topic of today's discussion, that is known as life history variation. So populations, they evolve in different ways so as to maximize their reproductive fitness, which is also known as Darwinian fitness. And this Darwinian fitness is measured in terms of the intrinsic rate of natural increase, that is R. So to increase the R value, different organisms have evolved different efficient reproductive strategies. So what are these different strategies? Number 1 is certain organisms breed only once in their lifetime, like the bamboo and the Pacific salmon fish. Whereas some organisms breed many times in their life, like the birds and mammals. Some organisms produce small number of large sized offsprings. That is, only less number of organisms will be produced, but they will be larger in size, like the birds and mammals. And some organisms will be producing large number of small sized organisms, because that is the fittest way for those organisms to survive in that particular environment, like the oysters and the pelagic fishes. So these 4 strategies are important, the different strategies which are evolved by the organism so as to survive in whatever environment they are present, so as to increase the R value. So R value is a measure, or it is a, we can say, a parameter for measuring natural selection or Darwinian fitness. So greater the R value, fitness is directly proportional to R. So if R value is greater, then the fitness of the organism is greater. So every organism try to increase the R value by adopting its own different strategy for survival, and that is what we have discussed here. 4 strategies which we have discussed over here. So with this, we conclude the discussion of today's topic of population attributes and population growth curve. And this is a combined graph of both exponential and the logistic growth. So here you can see in graph A, it is J-shaped, dn by dt is equal to Rn. And in graph B, we can see dn by dt is equal to Rn into k minus n by k. So these are the two different graphs which I have taken together. Now let us discuss the questions related to what we have discussed so far. There are 20 MCQ questions. So let's start with question number 1. Find out the odd one with respect to population. First one is natality. Second one is death rate, age pyramid, and births. So if I look at the first one, natality, which is roughly we can say birth rate per capita. So that is a characteristic of a population. Death rate is also a characteristic of a population. Age pyramid is also a characteristic of a population. Whereas if I look at birth is a characteristic of an organism. It is not a population attribute. So the answer for this question should be option number 4. Moving on with question number 2. Which of the following contributes an increase in the population density? So if I look at the first one, mortality is D, it will decreases. Emigration decreases, natality increases, and predation decreases. So the answer for this question should be option number 3. Moving on with next question. Which of the following is considered as a most realistic growth model? It should be logistic growth model or the Verhulst-Pearl logistic growth model, VPLGM. So answer is 4. Moving on with question number 4. In nature, a given habitat has enough resources to support a maximum possible number, beyond which no further growth is possible. This characteristic feature of nature is known as carrying capacity. Option number 2. Moving on with question number 5. A J-shaped curve depicts exponential growth where the conditions are limited, wrong. Exponential growth where the conditions are unlimited, correct. Logistic growth, no. Again, it is logistic growth, no. So the answer is 2. Moving on with question number 6. Which of the following is not true for J-shaped curve? J-shaped means it is going to be exponential curve. Exponential phase is prolonged, that is correct. Population never grows beyond carrying capacity. This is a wrong statement. It can grow beyond carrying capacity also, that I have told before. So answer 2 is the correct option. Moving on with question number 7. Which of the following type of age pyramid reflects a stable population growth? So they're asking about stable. In the case of stable, it is almost same in all these cases. So it is a nearly bell-shaped. Whereas triangle shaped is seen in the case of expanding population and urn shaped is seen in the case of declining population. So this is important. So here the answer should be option number 2. Moving on with question number 8. Biotic potential is intrinsic rate of natural increase at unlimited conditions. So option number 2 should be correct. Question number 9. Change in population size equation with prolonged exponential phase can be converted into logistic growth equation by multiplying it with what factor? So it is having exponential growth. We have to convert it into logistic growth by multiplying with a factor 1 minus n by k or k minus n by k, option number 2. Population evolved to maximize their reproductive fitness, also called as Darwinian fitness, and this is measured in terms of R value. So R value greater, reproductive fitness is greater. We have to maximize. So R value should be increased. So high R value. Option number 1 is correct. Moving on with question number 11. Select the incorrect statement regarding different population attributes. Natural selection operates at populational level, correct. Size of population tells us about the status in its habitat, correct. In age pyramids, age distribution of males and females are shown in separate diagrams. No, it is shown in the same diagram. So the answer is option number 3. Last statement states population is a group of individuals multiplying by sexual and asexual reproduction. This is also correct. Moving on with question number 12. Natality refers to birth rate. So answer is option number 1. Question number, death rate is wrong. It is birth rate. Option number 2 is correct. Natality refers to birth rate. So option number 2 is correct. Moving on with the next question. Question number 13. Asymptote. So as I have told, dn by dt is equal to 0. This is the concept for asymptote. So according to the equation, we have Rn into k minus n by k is equal to 0. So either this Rn should be equal to 0, that is not possible. So k minus n by k should be equal to 0, or we can say k minus n is equal to 0, or k is equal to n. So option number 2 is correct. Moving on with question number 14. When does the growth rate of a population following the logistic model equal to 0? That means when is dn by dt equal to 0? dn by dt equal to 0 when k is equal to n, or we can say n by k is exactly equal to 1. When n by k exactly equal to 1, then dn by dt becomes equal to 0. So it's basic maths question. So here the answer should be option number 2. Moving on with question number 15, again a numerical. nt plus 1 is equal to nt plus b plus I minus d plus e. Let us read the question now. A biologist studied the population of rats in a barn. He found that the average natality, that is B, is 250 and average mortality is 240. So if I take the sum of these two, applying the sign convention, it should be 10. Immigration 20, emigration 30. So again, difference is 10. So 10 minus 10 is coming. So this term complete should be 0. It should be a stable population. NT becomes equal to NT plus 1. So here, if initial case is not given, they're asking for the net increase in population, so it should be 0. Why 0? Because if I do the substitutions here, 250 minus 240 plus 20 minus 30. So this is coming out to be a plus 10 and this is coming out to be a minus 10. So it is coming out to be 0. So that is why the net increase is asked, that is NT plus 1 minus NT. So that is coming out to be 0. Question number 16. In the formula, dn by dt is equal to Rn into k minus n by k, what does the term k minus n by k stands for? It stands for environmental resistance, also known as biotic potential. So answer is option number 1. Moving on with question number 17. Which statement is not related to S-shaped population curve? Environmental resistance suddenly become effective. Exponential phase is followed by stationary phase. That is correct. Mass mortality and population crash occurs. Mass mortality and population crash occurs. That is not related. And the first one is also not related. So option number 4 is the correct option. Last MCQ. Which is not true for J-shaped population growth curve. In J-shaped, the exponential phase is prolonged. Population never grows beyond carrying capacity. So it is asking for J-shaped. In J-shaped, the population grows beyond carrying capacity also. So 2 should be the answer. They are asking for incorrect statement. Next is a board exam question. What is environmental resistance? Explain. So we have seen what is environmental resistance. It is the ability of an organism to produce maximum number of organisms during favorable conditions, and it is given by the formula k minus n divided by k. This is the equation. So that is important. Next is the difference between immigration and emigration. Immigration means number of organisms which are coming to a particular habitat, and emigration is leaving a particular habitat. Immigration increases the population, whereas emigration decreases the population. And immigration helps to speed up. Immigration may help to speed up or growth or prevents extinction of a smaller population, whereas in the case of emigration, that can promote quick reduction of population size or extinction of small populations. In the case of plants, it is similar to disseminates, whereas in the case of emigration, plants are fixed, so they do not show emigration. So with this, we conclude today's lecture, and in the next lecture we will be discussing about population interactions, which is the last topic of this chapter. So thanks for watching, and if you found this video to be useful, then do like, share and subscribe to the channel. Thanks again.